Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and just because the Vikings didn't play yesterday doesn't mean there won't be a Monday morning Murph. It's Brian Murphy, and listen, Brian, everybody knows the backstory, and if they don't, you grew up in Detroit, you've been here a long time. Vikings-Lions. Have you ever seen one like this? Where these
Not
are
in my lifetime.
two
And I
teams,
even
maybe the two best teams in the NFL?
in the best division in the NFL right now. I would say, I'd say arguably the Lions, based on their performance yesterday in Dallas and how thorough they dismantled the Cowboys. And no bias here, I think they are the best team in the NFL. Now, that being said, they also lost arguably the best defensive end in the NFL, Aiden Hutchinson, to a gruesome injury that's going to have a huge impact not only on this week, but going forward. But no, in my lifetime, I cannot remember a Lions-Vikings game with stakes this high. And what's fun about this is this game may not even be as big as what could happen Week 17 at Ford Field. And hey, don't sleep on the Bears. Don't sleep on the Packers. This is going to be a great, great second half to the season in the NFC North.
Well, I want to go through each team because, as you mentioned, these aren't just four good teams in the division. These are the four best point differentials in the entire NFL, which is insane that they could all be in one division, but they haven't played each other a whole heck of a lot yet. The Vikings have the win against the Packers, and now they will play the Detroit Lions. So let's stick with the Lions for a minute here in yesterday's game. The nation got to see one of the biggest embarrassments for the Dallas Cowboys, but also the Lions deserve full marks for their destruction of Dallas, because it had looked a little bit like Dallas was getting back on track after they had beaten Pittsburgh, and they played pretty good defense that night. So then they get a clutch performance from Dak Prescott. They go back home to Dallas to play Detroit in kind of a, hey, prove that you're back game, and just get run completely out of their own building. I think that Jared Goff right now is playing the best quarterback, or some of the best quarterback of the entire NFL. Certainly Lamar Jackson made his case for that as well yesterday. But this offense and the way that Jared Goff operates it, it's the greatest show on turf, Kurt Warner stuff. I mean, he is so in tune with his play caller, his playmakers. Guys are open. He's making great decisions. This offense versus Brian Flores' defense is Tyson Holyfield. I mean, put this on the marquee. I cannot wait to see how this offense for Detroit matches up with the Vikings defense.
It's a fantastic matchup. As you mentioned, between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores, and who's going to win that chess match. Detroit right now is rolling on all cylinders offensively. And yes, they may have lost Hutchinson yesterday, but I mean, they're equipped to win every game 51-40 if they have to. It looks like that, because there's really no holes on that team, from tight end to their running game. There were times when and Tom Brady was pointing this out. And by the way, I think Tom Brady had a great call yesterday. Might have been his best call of the season. At least that's what the media critics are saying out there. I mean, he was pointing out time after time when they handed the ball off to David Montgomery or Gibbs, that these guys weren't getting touched 5 yards into the run. This all goes back to the offensive line, and it's not sexy to talk about, but Detroit's offensive line is experienced. They're tough, and there's no way Jared Goff can make 4 decisions in the pocket without great pass protection, and that's what he's getting. And they're getting, every trick play they pull seems to work. They were toying with Dallas yesterday. Now, granted, Dallas was way handicapped on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Mike Zimmer is really shooting blanks right now because he just has no bullets, and it's just really sad to see. But this is a merciless league, and nobody's feeling sorry for the Dallas Cowboys. And besides, they can't take care of business at home. They've gotten run out of the building the last 4 or 5 times they played at home. So the Lions found a weak opponent, and they did what you do against a weak opponent. You put it down and you keep going. And, granted, they were coming off a bye, but there was a lot of vengeance in that because they've had some tough losses to Dallas in the past. Look, I would argue that Detroit might be America's team, only in that they might be America's sweetheart, because it's been a forlorn franchise for 60 years. They're finally an elite team, and perhaps the elite team in the NFL. And the Vikings had a week off to kind of look at that and get ready. And now they're playing at home for the first time in a month. after, the road games and then the trip to Lambeau and, of course, the trip to London. 5-0 versus 4-1. Dominant defense against dominant offense. What else can you ask for? This is going to be a fun matchup.
Another part of it that is unusual is that, as you mentioned, the Detroit Lions came into this year as a Super Bowl favorite pick for just about everybody. They start off the year okay, but nothing spectacular. And then the last couple of weeks, the gas pedal has just been pushed all the way down for Detroit. And, we'll talk about Hutchinson, but on the offensive side especially, they demolished Seattle. They demolished the Cowboys, but those defenses are nowhere as close as the Vikings. And I think that the narratives for each team, though, also are worth looking at, because this is the first time ever the Detroit Lions have had expectations like this, really, since Barry Sanders. I mean, there were a few years where Stafford's teams...
They were never that high, though.
Right. They were good, and you're hoping to make the playoffs, but never going into a season where you are a legit Super Bowl favorite. And here's the Vikings, a team that was picked over under 6.5 wins, which is so relevant to the conversation with them, how they've gone above and beyond what anybody expected from them. You and I had them as, hey, maybe this team can make the playoffs. I think we're better than Vegas thinks, but not of the 5-0 level variety. But what comes along with that is people will still think with the Detroit Lions, well, obviously, this is where they should be. They were in the NFC Championship last year, and are the Vikings for real? And this is an opportunity for the sort of plucky Vikings to prove that they're more than that. I mean, 5-0 already proves that you're a legitimate team. And most of the time, I did a look at this, Murph, most of the time teams win 11 or 12 games when they start 5-0. So that's where we expect probably 12 or a little bit better for this team. But I think that this is an opportunity for the Vikings to say, put our names there as well for the top Super Bowl contenders if they can beat the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, you've asked me the last 2 or 3 weeks now, after they were 3-0, 4-0, what's their year-end record going to be? And I'm still like, let me see what they do October 20th against Detroit. And after Detroit's performance yesterday, it's even more incumbent upon them, I'm sorry, to prove it. I mean, they can play the naysayer card all they want. As you mentioned, the Lions are expected to be here. I mean, they were, one turnover, one bounce off a helmet of walking into the Super Bowl last year. So they should be 4-1 and feeling 4-1 and feeling pretty good about themselves. We knew the offensive talent that they had, and again, they're going to have to adjust defensively without Hutchinson. But this is still a team that's already there. They've already arrived. The Vikings, they got to 5-0 in tremendous fashion. This is their first big real test, I feel like. I mean, Green Bay was they're always on the schedule at Lambeau, and the Lions are usually, for years, have been the get well team, for the Vikings. No matter where they were at in the standings, where they were at injury wise, if the Lions were on the schedule, this was a get well week. It's not anymore. It's a prove it week. And I think the Vikings are going to be, they're going to be rested. They're definitely feeling confident. And it is US Bank Stadium, when it's roaring, is one of the most difficult places to play. That's not going to scare Jared Goff. That's not going to scare Dan Campbell. I don't think it's going to affect the Lions one bit. How are the Vikings going to approach this, where they're expected to take care of business at home? Expectations are higher than they've ever been for them in a couple of years. And you need to show that you can handle an elite team at home if you want to be considered an elite team. I don't know where the point spread is as we speak here on Monday the 14th. You can fill me in as I'm rambling here, but I just feel like this is the Lions lose this game, they're not in bad shape. If the Vikings lose this game, they may not internally question how good they are, but externally they're going to have questions to answer. The schedule does soften up from here on out, but we're talking about this big matchup next Sunday. The way this is going, the way this season's trending, that Week 17 game at Ford Field, the stakes may even be higher. So, Judd Zolgad and I, the old man in town, he and I have always texted back and forth. We're kind of similar ages, similar upbringings, and we both agreed in our lifetimes we just cannot remember a Lions-Vikings matchup that had any kind of cachet that this one does, certainly in the middle of a season. So it's going to be fantastic to watch how the Vikings respond to arguably their toughest test of the season.
There are 18 weeks now, Murph. I don't know if you checked in on that. That's week 18 the Vikings play.
17th game. Sorry.
Yes.
When did they switch to a 16-game season? Was that?
You mean from 14?
Yeah.
I actually don't know the year right offhand. But you asked about the point spread, and it's a 1.5 point favorite for the Vikings, which might as well be, considering that they have home field, a complete toss-up. So that's how I would view it as well. I look at these two teams as having tremendous culture, great energy, great vibes, tons of talent. But the Lions did take the biggest gut punch. You mentioned the Vikings are getting healthy. We don't know the status yet officially of TJ Hockenson. I'm not sure that he's going to play this week. Aaron Jones is another one that is in question as well, whether he's going to play. But the Lions will definitely not have Aiden Hutchinson. I was lucky enough to have turned the game off already and not seen the injury. But very, very nasty for him. One of the league's great players. And you hope that he recovers to 100%, goes back to a defensive MVP level. But from a pure football perspective, we can't help but say, what a break for the Vikings that he is not going to play. I mean, Brian O'Neill's been great this year, and I think he would have done battle with him, but this was the best defensive end in the NFL to this point this year. I think that changes the dynamic for Sam Darnold and his comfort, even though they still have other pass rushers like McNeil is really good in the interior. But now they don't have that guy who every single drop back you have to chip, you have to double, and oftentimes it doesn't really matter. And Sam Darnold, when he's kept clean this year, has been fantastic. It really is when he gets a little jittery in the pocket and is feeling the pressure a bit like he was against the Jets that he wasn't the same quarterback. But I think this is a major factor and makes me lean toward projecting more of a shootout between these two teams.
Unless anyone forget too, Darnold's got some splaining to do after his past two starts. I don't think he's regressed to the point where he's, the scrap heap Darnold that we remember from the Jets in Carolina. But it was, a little bit troubling to see some of the decisions he was making in London and certainly in Lambeau. What the Vikings have been able to do, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do this against Detroit right away, is just pummel opponents in the first quarter and get out to such a large lead that all they have to do is lean on them for the remainder of the game. I think this, if it's truly going to be a shootout, which it looks, there's no reason to believe it won't be, it's going to be, haymakers left and right. I don't see a team, unless there's a turnover issue or some random special teams moment, I don't see a 14-0, 21-10 type lead for either club. I think it's probably going to be tit for tat all the way through. So how's Darnold going to be able to keep pace with Jared Goff? He hasn't really been asked to keep pace with anybody yet. He's been asked to be productive and stay out of the way and let the defense take care of it. I'm not saying the defense can't hold down Jared Goff, but you can't expect this defense, no matter how tenacious and playmaking they are, to hold the Detroit Lions to 10 or 17 points. I mean, this feels like a 34-31, 41-35 type game. Whoever has the ball last wins. And maybe it comes down to Will Reichert, Mr. Perfection, the kicker. It was funny looking at the Lions' new kicker last year. I think they had mentioned yesterday he hadn't made a field goal past 35 yards until I think the second quarter in Dallas. So that's something to keep an eye on too. Reichert's been money from 50 plus all season. There's just so many little things that are going to happen in this game. It's probably going to be a mistake and turnover type game that makes the difference. Who makes the fewest, who makes the biggest plays at the right moment, which is about 95% of every game. But I'm really going to be interested to see how Darnold responds and how effective he's going to be early, because if he struggles early again and the defense gets on the field a lot, it's one thing to be on the field a lot for the New York Jets and holding your breath for a broken down Aaron Rodgers to see what he may or may not do. It's another thing to be on the field 2/3 of the time against Jared Goff and that offense, because they could get exhausted pretty quickly, and the Lions can exploit a good defense if it's tired at any moment. So the Vikings, even if they're not scoring a ton of points, they need first downs. They need to keep the chains moving. They need to keep Detroit sort of backpedaling a bit. So if this does become a possession type game, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep pace with the Lions.
What are the other things on your mind coming out of the bye regarding the Vikings? Because I am thinking a lot about the running back situation. I was certainly thinking about which Jaguars players the Vikings could potentially poach. Travis Etienne got hurt. I don't want to say that it was one of those we're down by a lot hamstring injuries, but maybe he's week to week with the Jaguars. The Vikings could potentially use another running back. Also, the Titans lost again. Tony Pollard has been on my mind. The Carolina Panthers lost again. Several players to potentially poach from that roster. Their top corner, Miles Sanders, their backup running back who barely plays. I'm looking around thinking about
Cleveland.
how to add. Well, yeah, Cleveland, if they were going to trade Delvin Tomlinson back to Minnesota, maybe, but I don't know if they can start trading off parts when they're still playing their abomination at quarterback. That's what's been on my mind a lot, Murph, is what can you do with this? And now when I look at the NFC North, and they're all the best teams in the league by point differential, you're going to need a bigger sword. Like, you're going to need as much as you can possibly get to battle, because the Packers are certainly not going away. They're going to be fighting you all the way to the end. I mean, we sort of left them for dead a little early in the season when Love got hurt. They're 4-2. And so they're not a million miles back of the Vikings. And with Detroit playing the way they're playing, and even Chicago is going to be tough matchups, I just keep thinking about make roster moves anywhere you can to improve this thing, because it will have to be the absolute best version of itself to beat these guys.
Well, the first thing I want to hear is Kevin O'Connell's update on Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Whether that's today, tomorrow, Wednesday, whenever you guys are meeting, I think that's the biggest key. Is his hip injury as casual as it sort of seemed to be in London, because he was on the sideline in uniform for the entire game, and Kevin O'Connell seemed to, he's week to week. I mean, week to week, there's what, 10, 12 weeks left. I mean, that could constitute, and week to week means nothing. It's a very vague, we'll get back to you later kind of diagnosis. They're going to have to be more specific this week. So how is he healed over the bye? How effective would he even be if he's limited? That could dictate whether they need more depth. Well, depth everywhere, but more depth at running back. But boy, you can have no shortage of depth in this league. And I think we were talking about it last week. I think on the defense, is as solid as this unit is, as dynamic, as sharing in the mission as they are, there's still one play from losing somebody key. I don't think there's any shortage of depth. I don't think there's any move Kwesi shouldn't consider including dealing away limited draft capital, as we discussed last week. I mean, they've already hit their home run with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, if you're looking at this as one of those once-in-a-decade type teams that can run deep into the playoffs that the Vikings seem to put together every year, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're managing for 2025, 2026, especially when you got a 5-0 team in a division full of alpha males that you're going to have to face between now and the end of week 18 in January. Because, other than the Packers test, I mean, they still got 2 against the Bears. They've still got Green Bay at home, and then they've got to go to Detroit to finish the season. I don't think you should leave any chip on the table right now. And if you can identify spaces where there's a little bit of softness, if, you've got injuries, you still got a couple weeks before the trade deadline, I think you're going to see a lot of desperate NFL teams. You've ticked them all off right now in this new world NFL, where the trade deadline has become an opportunity for teams in midseason to prepare for the future and also augment their current rosters. It's becoming more of a thing. I can't imagine the Vikings playing the Twins game, which is let's be conservative and not lean into the moment, because, we just got to be careful.
Yeah, the Vikings are going to make their revenue no matter what when they have. Well,
there's no Valley sports issues in the NFL.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And every team has the same kind of salary cap. But when it comes to the defense, this is also very much on my mind, because some of the competition in the division, all the quarterbacks are playing extremely well. We saw Caleb Williams play excellent football. yesterday against the Jaguars in a blowout win. Jordan Love looked spectacular. And you could say, yeah, it's against Arizona, but Arizona's not a joke. Arizona beat Detroit this year. They've played some close games. They played a close game against Buffalo. They beat the San Francisco 49ers. Like, I think that Green Bay win was really telling for where Jordan Love stands. And what I keep kind of thinking about with the Vikings defense is that they've gotten such great performances from every single player that they signed, from the top player all the way down to the just depth signing. Everybody has been good. Everybody has contributed, but I do wonder about how much they've asked from everybody. They've asked a lot of snaps from Jonathan Grenard, who I don't believe has ever played 700 snaps in a season. They've asked a ton from Stephon Gilmore, who is he turned 35, 34, 35 years old. They've asked a ton from Harrison Smith so far. I think that they do have to at certain parts of the schedule. And I don't mean today for sure, because they're playing the Lions. So you don't want to be managing anybody's health at that point, but
it's only mid-October.
Right. There's a long way to go with this defense, and keeping it fresh as they possibly can is a factor, I think, when you have a lot of players who are older, a lot of players who have had injury histories. And I'm curious to see also how they continue to stop the run as they play a team like Detroit that is so great at running the football. They haven't been really tested there. So how this defense performs when they don't get a 17-point lead early and they go back and forth, and then the long term of this defense, because Brian Flores has pretty much, when it comes to snap counts, put the gas pedal down with all of his great players. I think those are also things to watch when it comes to the second half of the season, or whatever you want to call it, second 66% of the season.
And that's incumbent upon the Vikings offense, as we were talking about. You can't afford 3 and outs, even if you're getting big leads. I mean, they got a big lead in London basically because of Van Ginkel's pick 6, and they still weren't really doing much offensively. And you can't afford too many 3 and outs. You can't afford any careless turnovers, which the Vikings have been very careless with the football and have gotten away with it. Again, you've had some curious decisions by Sam Darnold at various times that have really put the defense in bad situations when they're exhausted at the end of a game. And if they're exhausted at the end of games in early to mid-October, where are they going to be in December and January when you really need them? It's a war of attrition. We all know that. So this is incumbent upon their running game, which is, again, why Aaron Jones is such a key, because he's so versatile and he's contributed in so many different ways. If he is limited this week or unable to go this week, it's going to be really incumbent on the Vikings to, again, be smart with the football, be selectively aggressive, but you need to keep your defense off the field. So if that means settling for a field position game early on, settling for 3 points instead of going for broke, as O'Connell likes to do to prove to his guys that he's aggressive, there are moments to be, managing. You're managing for 4 quarters and you're managing for 17 games while you're managing in real time. And I think that's where this is, Darnold needs to step up and at least level set, as it were, in the corporate speak, to not keep backsliding and putting the defense in really tough situations. So that'll be interesting to watch. Who's going to be taking the majority of snaps? Are they going to be able to keep their defense off the field? And is Darnold going to be limiting the mistakes that he's been making the last couple of weeks that do raise some red flags for the long-term viability of the defense?
Yeah, how Kevin O'Connell navigates Sam Darnold through the rest of this season, all the way through week 18, Murph, will be fascinating to watch, because this first 5 weeks has been essentially a masterclass by O'Connell. We can nitpick the Jets game, and I certainly did last week, but the Jets also have an elite defense. It's one of the best defenses in the NFL, and it was in London. That's just a tough situation. It was raining and all that. But the entire season, and rocky moments that are going to come about, bad turnovers that are going to come about, how does he kind of usher him through that? And I also think that TJ Hawkinson will be really big for ushering him through some of the tougher defenses that they're going to play. But I also can't help but think, Murph, once you get past these next two tough games, then you get to the wide open lands of the AFC South, and you go from the toughest of the tough opponents. When you look at the power rankings and things like that, you're going to see a bunch of teams that have been on the Vikings schedule so far this year. And to even be 5-1, if it doesn't work out this week, is an incredible feat, considering that you have the Indianapolis, the Jacksonville, the Tennessee that are on the way. And all these teams kind of look like a mess. And the Vikings are in a totally different spot. So navigating him through these next couple of weeks, getting into that lighter part of the schedule where they can get on a roll, will be really fascinating to watch. I did want to get your thoughts on just the rest of the day, where Jordan Love plays great. The Packers look phenomenal at Lambeau, and also Chicago. If you woke up early to watch that game, you were disappointed because it just stunk. But Caleb Williams didn't, and Chicago didn't, and they look like they're sort of coming together. Just your other thoughts from a Sunday of watching football.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams seems to have arrived. I think over his last 4 games, he's had a passer rating over 109. Granted, they haven't faced the stiffest of competitions, but it was a bit of a slow start with him. They're feeling pretty confident at 4-2 and who they are and who they're becoming. Green Bay, I think their slow start was probably a little bit of an aberration. And if you look back at their last couple of games and going back to that second half against the Vikings, I mean, Jordan Love's playing with more confidence than he ever has at this point. I'm curious to see, where the rest of the NFC is going to shake out beyond the North. You seem to see, San Francisco's, they got themselves better again on Thursday night, but I still think there's a lot of question marks about them. The Rams, who, by the way, the Vikings face right away on Thursday night after this Lions game, you can almost put those two games together as a 1A and 1B test. I don't know where they're at. They seem to be backpedaling, but they're very dangerous. But where's the rest of the NFC kind of setting up? I mean, Philadelphia seems to be really, really inconsistent. Dallas, as of 9:30 in the morning, I'm not sure if Mike McCarthy's still employed or should he be. Washington seems to be the class of that division right now with a rookie quarterback. The rookie quarterbacks have played really well this season, have been really fun to watch. So I'm be curious where the NFC kind of shakes out, because the teams that we thought were going to be elite are still kind of hanging around with the potential to be elite. And I still feel like San Francisco and Philadelphia will probably be there at the end. But I'm down on Dallas. I'm down on the Rams. And Washington is suddenly a formidable force. So beyond the NFC North, how is the NFC going to shake out? Is Seattle for real still? I'm going to be curious where those power rankings come out. And look, if the Vikings survive the NFC North and do manage to win this division, I mean, is their competition and their path to the Super Bowl potentially still going to go through the NFC North in the postseason, or is somebody going to emerge in the NFC? Is it going to be the old school teams that we thought that were going to be great? 49ers, Philadelphia, maybe the Rams put together something and get well in the second half, or is Washington for real? That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's a great storyline of who else is even good in the NFC outside of the North. Atlanta had a win against Carolina, but Carolina's the worst team in football. The Tampa Bay Bucks putting up
your boy Cousins is putting up his numbers.
He played well again yesterday, and he seems to be back doing his thing. But also it was against Carolina. Now, when it comes to Tampa Bay, they had an impressive win over the Saints. Saints were playing a backup quarterback, but 51 points is 51 points for Tampa Bay. You mentioned the Eagles. Their head coach is yelling at the fans in Cleveland after the win, but it was not an impressive win. 20-16 over a pretty awful, messy Cleveland team.
And that's the wrong fan base to antagonize.
Yeah. The fan base that they once had to move John Elway to the other side of the field as he was playing against the Browns because they kept throwing dog bones at him while he was in the end zone. But Philadelphia just doesn't look all that strong. It might. I thought of this yesterday. See if you agree, Murph. The hardest game for the Vikings the whole rest of the season that isn't in the North, I think, is Kirk and Atlanta on their schedule. I don't think that there is another game on their schedule, non-division, that's going to be tougher than that, which really tells you about the non-division schedule, I think.
Yeah, and boy, what a day that's going to be, or day, or I assume they may even flex it December 8th. The mood in the building that day. Cousins and his milquetoast attitude. He's going to want blood. He's going to want vengeance. I think the crowd is going to be ready to move on totally from Kirk. I mean, I think that game will literally put the final marking on the Kirk Cousins experiment. That is going to be as fun of a narrative type game as there's going to be the rest of the season. But you're right. I mean, he's putting up 300, 400, 500 yards against Patsies. What does it all mean? By December 8th, I think we're going to understand who the Falcons are. I just want to see how the Vikings react to being 5-0 coming into the cauldron of chaos, as we call it, at US Bank Stadium. I mean, it's going to be a supercharged atmosphere Sunday afternoon. And this isn't going to define their season, but it's really going to, I think, let the rest of the country know where they're at. And they're going to have to be wearing that prove it label for a while. They may not like it. We may not like it, but it's kind of the reality they're in.
Okay. We usually don't have you pick the next game on the Monday show, but do you think they win? Do you think they beat the Lions?
I'm going to hedge a little bit. If Aaron Jones is playing and he's effective, I think they do. I think they win. I think they win a really, like a 34-31 kind of game where they have to hold off Goff at the end, or it comes down to a Reichert kick. If Aaron Jones is unable to go, I'm going to stay with the Lions because they seem to be rolling too good right now.
Well, I don't pick this thing until later in the week, so I'm just going to hold off on
Thanks.
that. But a great Monday morning, Murph. I appreciate your time as always. This is as good as it gets, Murph. So I can't wait to break it down with you again next Monday. Thanks for your time, man.
All right, thanks.